Good morning. Good morning. It's Make It Happen Monday. For those that are new to the show, I'm Cheryl Andrews, also known as the Listening Detective, and we talk about the questions you need to ask yourself to achieve success without stress. And we also share stories, our inside stories, because one of the things I think that really does stop us from being successful, and it does cause us stress, is that we compare and contrast ourselves with the outside of other people, but we have really no idea what's happening on the inside. And so I'm very privileged as the listening detective to get to listen to some amazingly successful people, and I get to hear what's happening inside. And more importantly, I want to ask you the questions to encourage you to do the same. So gorgeous welcome to Make It Happen Monday. I hope you liked my new video. I'm very pleased with that. I would like to thank my son Liam, who's created that for me. So without any further today, the title today is Success Without Sleep. I wanted to change it, but I'd left it too late and Facebook and LinkedIn wouldn't let me. So we're going to go with that. But really what I want to talk about is that it's really easy in the world of being successful to end up losing sleep. Now, maybe because you're worried or you're stressing over something, or you're got ideas going ahead, or you're excited, or there's lots of things that may impact your sleep patterns. But there's also this kind of belief that, successful people, you hear people say, when you model successful people, they go, oh, I get up at 4:30, I have an ice cold bath, and I do this and this. And it's almost like we're maybe conditioned or even believe that we need to be getting up early. So today I want to talk about, really the questions that you can ask yourself to get clarity of your own sleep patterns, what works about them, what doesn't work about them. And then, when you're listening to other people, the more you know yourself, you know which parts of other people's models is worth trying on and which you just know won't work for you. So go look at the questions you can ask yourself. Good morning, whoever's just joining me this morning. Thank you for coming on live with me. We're looking at the importance of actually knowing your own patterns and knowing yourself well. And then the importance of, the impact of criticizing your own sleep patterns. So they're the three things I want to talk about today. So let's just think about sleep for you right now is like what? That's one of the questions you can really think about. Another thing that you could explore for yourself is when you've got the answer to that, you might ask yourself, what kind of? Is there anything else about that? Where is it? And just to find out as much as you can about sleep for you right now is like what? Then another thing that we've been, having done the research with Doris, those of you know we're running a course starting on the 17th of May. I'll pop the link, actually. I think I've got it handy. Let me just put it in the post now, see if you can get it. I'm running this as an associate with Clean Learning, and I'm facilitating with Doris Leopold in May. And as a result of that, we've been doing some research and we've been listening to people who sleep really well, people who don't sleep so well. And some of the stuff that's come out from that discussion is that what's really useful and really resourceful is to know what your model for sleep is currently, to understand when you're sleeping well or good sleep for you is like what. But some of the other things that's been really interesting to be curious about is actually being fascinated about, when you go to bed, that's like what, or when you're falling asleep, that's like what, and when you wake up, that's like what. So getting to know the various parts of the process of sleep for yourself and understanding your own model through using clean language, what people are discovering is they get this embodied experience through the metaphor world and also just through the language, that when they need to go to sleep, they know their own personal process. They know what works for them and they can reconnect with it easier. That's the kind of feedback that we've been getting. And actually, some other feedback that we've got, which has been really useful, is that having talked about it and reconnected with good sleep for them is like what they've noticed is they spend less time thinking about their sleep. In fact, when we followed up a couple of weeks later to find out what's happened to sleep, one person said, I hadn't even thought about it for 2 weeks. Whereas before that, perhaps they were spending quite a lot of time talking about, oh, I haven't had enough sleep, I don't sleep very well, those kinds of conversations. So from a success point of view, if we could save the time and energy invested talking about poor sleep, and instead we focused ourselves by asking questions like, good sleep for you is like what, and we put the time and energy into actually getting curious about what's happening when it works, then we would actually free more time up. So they're the kind of questions I'm going to, and we'll do a little bit more about those in a moment. In fact, I can put those in here. Sleep for you is like what? And in the post I've just put up there, I also mention in there that with those other ones, there's good sleep for you and going to sleep is like what. So we're still researching, we're still doing interviews. If you are somebody who's a really good sleeper, I'd love to talk to you. Please comment below. I'm looking to interview you for this particular program that we're running, because we want to get as much information about what is the most useful models for us to explore over that 6-week process. But one of the other things that can happen is that the reason why it's really important for you to know your own patterns is because we can get really, really caught up in comparing ourselves with other people. And so even me, I must admit, this week I've been noticing I'm comparing myself with a younger version of myself. There was a time with my business where I was getting up at 5:34 every day, okay? And I've noticed, and I was up and I was awake and everything was great and it was fine. And I would have said to you, I thrive and I'm happy and I only need about 5.5 hours sleep, 6 hours sleep. And one of the things I've forgotten and overlooked is that at the time, things were different in my life. Things were, I didn't need that much sleep, but I'm noticing at the moment I do. And one of the fundamental things I think that's changed is that I'm more in tune with the seasons. So I'm sleeping more because it's winter and we've still got dark mornings, although I really enjoyed waking up at 6:30 today and seeing that it was getting light. So the chances are I could be really criticising myself for not getting up early at the moment, and I could make myself get up. I could set an alarm and get myself up. But I also know that as the mornings get lighter and lighter, I will start sleeping less and less, because that's the pattern. That's what I've watched and observed. And I could get in a very bad habit of comparing my sleep patterns of today with the summer patterns and the spring patterns and criticising myself. Whereas actually, because I know my patterns and I've paid attention to them over the last 2 or 3 years, I know that for 2 or 3 months, I do sleep longer. The winter months are my time for recuperating, regenerating, on a bigger scale, and then I sleep less and less as the spring and the summer come on. And maybe my model's changing, and that's okay. Just be okay with knowing what your own model is. So the benefit of knowing your own model is that when you hear other people's, you're not likely to default into the criticising. You can stay curious. So if you hear somebody else's model and you hear they get up at 4:30, you can choose if you want to try it on for size. But I think most of us know when it comes to sleep that we have, generally speaking, there's people who are the owls, who stay up till late and can work till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whereas there's people that are larks. And depending on your natural rhythms and your natural way of doing things, you might be someone that's more preference the other one way or the other. So trusting and knowing your own patterns and making sure that when you're listening to experts or you listen to other things, you do it, but in balance of actually what works for you. Good morning, who's joining us today. Please leave a comment. It'd be great to hear from you. So the third thing is about not criticising. One thing that has really come out from the research we've done so far that's been really, really interesting is people who consider that they are good sleepers and those who consider that they have bad sleep or don't sleep very well. It's been really interesting to notice that some of the behaviour is the same. So, for example, how often it happens and frequency is something we're going to dig down and find out a bit more about when we talk to these people on the next round of research. But people who consider themselves have good sleep, when we've asked them bad sleep views like what, is they don't really have a model of it. They don't criticise themselves they don't criticise their sleep. They either, sometimes they wake up in the middle of the night and they feel compelled to go and do something for 2 or 3 hours and then they might go back to bed. Other times they wake up in the middle of the night and they might be compelled to go and do something and they don't go back to bed. But they don't define that as bad. that is just a night of a different kind of sleeping routine. And so it's been really, really interesting just being curious about what determines good sleep. Is it, I've heard people say, well, if I haven't had 8 hours sleep, and when you question, well, where does it come from that you need 8 hours sleep? It is usually something they've read or something they've been told, but it's not necessarily something that if they evaluate how they feel in the morning and the impact of the hours of sleep they're getting, it's been really, really different. So I would love to know for you, how much time do you spend talking about sleep, thinking about sleep, being frustrated and holding your own sleep patterns in contempt, criticizing it? So those of you know, we've got the Manager Critic book. Is be aware of, if you are criticizing your own sleep patterns, be fascinated and curious about what's the impact. And how much time do you spend talking about needing more sleep, wanting more sleep, or having too much sleep, or feeling tired all the time? And just notice what works about that. Is it changing anything for you? Is it improving your ability to work, learn, and live at your best? And if not, perhaps consider training your attention on, what is happening when it works. What is happening, what works about what the way it is, what's happening at the moment, and consider what happens between where you are now and where you'd like to be. By training your attention, so at least the time you are thinking about it and talking about it is focus on a resourceful state, on just the way you'd like it to be. And if you are curious about your sleep patterns and you want to improve them, please do check out the event that's on the 17th of May, because we will spend 6 weeks meeting for 90 minutes a week for 6 weeks, and we will be exploring those. And what I've started to notice just by listening to other people is the gorgeousness is you get to hear your own system and find out what your system's like. But when you're in a group of people who are doing the same thing and they're talking about their model of what works, if you like something they're doing, you can borrow it and go and try it out and experiment with it for a week, and then come back the following week and actually review it with us and compare and contrast it. But lastly, I just want to sort of talk about the 7 principles of motivated action. Those of you who know I'm currently writing Do, Delegate or Ditch. And 2012, when I really hit the wall myself and I was completely exhausted, I felt a complete failure. I felt a fraud at work and a failure at home, and was really, really struggling. Obviously, I didn't sleep particularly well during that time. And when I went on the journey of going, okay, so what is it my client, I'd helped loads of clients be successful, but I wasn't achieving the same kind of success, and definitely not without stress. And it was definitely any success I was getting was without very much sleep, and I was very, very exhausted by the whole process. When I started paying attention to what was it my clients were doing that I wasn't, what most of the people that I spoke to who did, the principle pause came out of it. People who are successful and they do what they say they're going to do, they understand what they need to rest. So I remember talking to one lady, she said, physical fitness is really important to me. And one of the great things about doing physical exercise is when I go to bed, I'm tired and I always sleep really well. But she also identified that was the only time she rested, and that actually she had to learn how to rest her mind and her mental thinking, had to have rest points throughout the day as well. Learning to sit quietly for a moment and just slow down during the day was also some kind of rest that she required. And so one of the things that we've been researching in context of pausing is, what do you need to rest, restore and recharge? So sleep is one aspect of it. Sleep is one part of getting ourselves rested, restored and recharged. But how we behave during the day and how well we do restorative work, restorative thinking during the day, for some, that impacts their sleep. And so I've been really curious and fascinated about I did a poll on LinkedIn recently, and I said, what's likely to cause stress for you? And 46% of people said it would be lack of sleep. 23, I think it was, missing a deadline, and whatever the percentage is left was to do with worrying about what other people thought. So what was interesting is if they hadn't got a sleep, that could cause stress. And what I'm noticing is that for some people, being stressed could cause you not to have sleep. So it's like a cyclical process, and it's a chicken and egg, which one comes first. And so, as always, you know that I ask you questions to think about what you'd like to have happen, but also to train your attention on what is happening when it works. Because most of the time we get stressed, we'll have our negative bias, means our attention is often on what's not working. So we'll talk about how tired we are, how much, how stressed we are, what we don't, and we don't think about, well, given this is what's happening, what would I like to have happen? How do I need to be? What resourceful support do I need? And we certainly don't always delve down and think, okay, when I'm resting at my best, that's like what? When I'm restoring at my best, when I recharge, that's like what? And start to actually work out what it is that's happening when you are at your best. And for me, what I know is this model is constantly evolving and constantly changing. This week on Do Delegate or Ditch foundation course, we're looking at living at your best models, and I'm watching the recording of that I recorded in October, and I'm talking in there that my living at my best model is I've realised I need to have more alone time, I need some more solitude, and that was recording in October last year. We're now just in February, 3 or 4 months later, and I'm like, okay, I've had enough solitude. That's sort of almost my winter period. I'm now ready for some gatherings and some groups of people. So living at my best right now in this moment is actually about getting together with people, creating memories, telling stories and laughter. Whereas actually back in October, my living at my best model was very much I needed to retreat, which actually, as I said that out loud, I realised that also aligns with my sleeping pattern extending through the winter periods, where I tend to have 8, 9 or even 10 hours sleep, whereas in the spring, summer and autumn, I tend to only need between 6.5 and 7 hours sleep. So I hope you found this useful today. As always, we're going to finish the show with the questions. Now that you've been listening to me, and we've been talking about success and sleep and some questions that you can ask yourself and how you can train your attention on what is happening when it works and actually get clear about what you'd like to have happen. Having invested that time listening to me today, what would you like to have happen? Either think about it or write it down and just notice, are you talking about what you want, or are you talking about what you don't want, or what you want less of, or what you want to get away from? So if you're talking about what you want, then ask yourself some questions like what kind of, is there anything else about that? Where is it? Does it have a shape or size? And get curious about what do you mean by what you say. If you're talking about what you don't want, then remember, you can ask yourself when you don't have it, then what happens? And just notice, keep doing that until you have an outcome of what you want. Your own brain and your own system cannot support you if you talk, and people around you can't support you if you're talking about what you don't want. And once you've got clarity of what you'd like to have happen, think about how do you need to be? What kind of you is that you that makes that happen? And again, just notice whether you're talking about a resourceful state, you need to be confident, organised, something, or are you being critical of yourself? Are you saying, I need to be less lazy, I need to be less this, less that? So if you are talking about things you don't want or wouldn't be working, and it doesn't sound like it's about a resourceful state for you, again, try the question, and when you're less lazy, then what happens? Until you've got an outcome for how you need to be that's focused on something that sounds resourceful and helpful to enable you to make that happen. And last but not least, the question is, for you to be like that, what kind of resource or support might you need? And in context of today, that might be you need it to be dark, you might need it to be quiet, you might need to not be worrying about something. So again, if you're not worrying, then what happens? Have a think about what kind of resource or support you need. And as always, As we've talked many times before, if you are struggling to get the clarity of what you want and the confidence to make it happen, and you're overwhelmed by the emotions and the stress that often is caused by change, then please get in touch. We're here to support and resource you to make sure you can achieve success without stress. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you again next week.